Gabriel Gobron, History and Philosophy of Caodaism, Reformed Buddhism, Vietnamese Spiritism, New Religion in Eurasia. Translated from the original French by Pham Xuân Thai. A reading by Suzanne Daly. Introduction. Gabriel Gobron, author of the present work on Caodaism, was an ardent and courageous writer, journalist, and lecturer. Born at Bienville, July 5, 1895, he quit the world and its sufferings at Rethel, July 8, 1941. With the present work, and undoubtedly with others that shall follow, Gabriel Gobron continues his literary works in the beyond. This time, the work far surpasses literature. We can speak of the message, and with a capital letter. Being an eminent polyglot, an indefatigable inquirer in the world of the spirit and spirits, novelist, historian, journalist, and teacher, Gabriel was a curious man, and himself a curiosity. A great soul by his overflowing intellectual generosity. He was an ardent polemicist. He was curious indeed, but without dilettantism. When he thought to have discovered a spiritual beauty, a philosophical or religious truth, he liked to make it known and shared by others at once. He would not hesitate to fight, always with passion, against those who, in his eyes, wanted to put the light under a bushel. It is in this way that he discovered Caodaism, and also in this way that he fought to his last breath, praying for his illumination. Gabriel Gobron, a great intellect, was above all a great heart. After a period of research, study, and discovery, beginning in 1930, Gabriel Gobron became a convinced propagator, a well-informed and before long officially accredited initiator of Caodaism in the West, and more particularly in France. Lectures, articles, and observations succeeded one another, and with the remaining unpublished texts, they form a copious collection of which the present posthumous book is one of the main parts. Thus, the present work constitutes an authentic message from the beyond. It was a consoling task to us to work out this text. It is the case because Gabriel Gobron is a gentle lamb who endeavors in vain to become enraged, whence the attitude of vituperation which makes us think of, as I have mentioned above, Leon Bloy and of the Old Testament prophets. Gabriel Gobron is a mild man, and his dreams are magnificent. And we were dreaming since our primary school days to learn how to teach the little people of the world to create a cosmos home by the side of the house of God. Do not make teaching an immediate utilitarian business and materialistic matter, but make education biocosmic to show the students that we are as much the glorious sons of the universe as the obscure children of the hamlets. Reveal the divine that slumber in us, the subconscious by which we are in relation with the most improbable and mysterious entities and occult faculties, and which assures the triumph of the spirit over animality, over the brute that growls within us. Reveal the divine that slumbers within us, and seek again for God as much as God seeks us. Then it will be possible to envisage the fusion of the house of God and the cosmic home into an immense fraternal temple, the synthesis of both. We are still far from this harmony of the mystic. We are still far from it as much through the fault and incomprehension of some, the dogmatics, as of others, the rationalists. The house of God and the cosmic home will still be opposed to each other for a long time to come. They are, however, the fraternal and permanent expression of the ad diem, which is in the heart of all human beings, living tabernacles of the divine. The book of Gabriel Gobron is crammed with just, interesting, and elevated ideas on education, to be given, on liberty to be respected, and on spirituality, etc. His literary form is then more serene, sober, and harmonious. It is an immense sheet of water, limpid and fresh before the dam and torrential rapids and the overflowing of the crude polemic style. We must defend Jean Peuple, but we must protect the exploited from exploitation. But we must not let Jean Peuple think that he is a little saint, for as soon as a Jean Peuple happens to be on the other side, we quickly find that power corrupts. Therefore, while he defends him, at the same time, Gabriel Gobron exposes the manias, vices, and misunderstandings of this good Jean Peuple. And it's too bad for the too fond ears, for which the ostended testes of Saint Bernard must be translated into be men, for fear of a literal translation. Gabriel Gobron writes, "Vanquish animality, conquer the brute that growls in us." And by his style, he, the new Dr. Jekyll, lets Mr. Hyde, whom all of us bear in us, speak freely. But as in Stevenson's novel, it happens that Mr. Hyde disengages himself from the wise Dr. Jekyll. We may then ask ourselves whether Gabriel Gobron would not have too fixed a tendency to separate forcibly matter from spirit. The brute is what it is, useful and capable of perfection, destined to transmute itself, to evolve and elevate itself from heavy planes to the ethereal. It is thus, for example, that he speaks rudely of sexuality and even sensuality, initiated in the secrets of stenolysis of Granada. Gabriel Gobron knows well that the human center of G, of the sacred pentagram, bears precisely on him. All the possibilities of evolution and of transformation on all planes, cosmic, carnal, mystic, and divine. By the letter G, matter exalts and purifies itself toward the spirit incarnated in matter, the whole forms one. Beside their literary and philosophical merits, the works of Gabriel Gobron constitute and contain some psychological documents. They have been the expression of social retrogressions of several generations. This was true of some books of our author. Injustices born, sincere, and pure dreams unrealized, atavistic restraints, all the accumulated hereditary traits, these are what the author relates to us, for the author is urged by 1,000 demon-inspirers who blow us the best and the worst in the long genealogy which Gabriel Gobron gives us. He sometimes touches grandeur, while his simplicity shows what it is and what he is. But soon Mr. Hyde returns, and here is our author, lost in massive details, which, however, may have their own significance and reasons for existence. The reader, tasting the paragraphs of a very good observation, where harmonized sensibility dominates the style and simplifies it, tells to himself that the dispersion, the loss of control, the ebullience of the atavistic rancors really constitute, with the pride of being what he is, the psychological document, about which I have spoken, and the author is the actor at the same time, though without acting or posing in the human comedy. This must be said because in the present posthumous work, The History and Philosophy of Caodaism, the psychological case is surpassed. The present work is a metaphysic testimony. There are no more the deceased ancestors of Gabriel Gobron, expressing themselves through him as a literary medium, but rather Gabriel Gobron himself, the brother Gago from the Eternal Orient, who gives us his message. The present book is a precious testimony, and may we venture to say, a fundamental book, the spiritual repercussions of which will be considerable. The word Caodaism derives from Cao Đài, the literal translation of which corresponds to Supreme Palace. This double term is found in the most ancient Buddhist prayers. It establishes the principal origin of this religion, which is, first of all, as we shall see, a kind of reformed Buddhism. The new religion, its essential message dates from 1926, is rooted in the most tried tradition of Buddhism and its purest revelations. Caodaism is, up to a certain point, comparable to what Protestantism had been in its origin compared to Catholicism. For the rest, even this possibility of comparison is already outweighed in the beneficent sense, that is to say, in the sense of good understanding. Permitting the vision in a more or less remote future, the union of the Christian churches in a total Catholic unity. What characterizes Caodaism is its spirit of synthesis. That is why its conciliating role can render a great service to religious peace, and thence quite simply to peace. There is no sectarianism in Caodaism, and also, instead of tending toward the opposition of religions among themselves, this new religion constitutes and will constitute more and more a permanent call to goodwill among the various creeds, religious, mystic, philosophical, or esoteric. Understanding among all spiritual forces will give the world the best harmony at all levels. Caodaism, as we shall see, is a religious synthesis which, in spirit and in truth, tends to harmonize all human beings with the laws of the cosmic order. In order to penetrate the rites of this new and at the same time very old religion, it suffices to be spiritually free, intellectually sincere, cordially kind, and physically at the service of good. The spiritual freedom required is that which relieves the being from dogmatically imposed restraints and mental frauds due to the undemonstrated a priori, and that in the practice of the universal good. We can say, and we shall see it in the following present book, that Caodaism, beside the inspired part, possesses in itself, aside from the message, a whole set of propositions, the distinctness and precision of which are a charm to the reason as well as an evidence for the intelligence. Whether these reasonable propositions be first of all messaged or inspired, the effect is still that of a mystic progression in the attractive radiance of the doctrine which tends with all its divine and human force to fundamental truth, to integral beauty in the practice of the universal good. What will surprise certain readers is that Caodaism arises from contemporary revelation, and that this revelation is attained through the course of Spiritism. We should rather surprise the conformists who love their ready-made ideas, well-ordered classifications, and relationships as logical as they are artificial. If we would reveal the Spiritist sources of the principle, great human movements from Joan of Arc to Caodaism. The Spiritist character of the military genius of Joan of Arc was demonstrated by the work of Lieutenant Colonel Collet, who published at Nancy, 1920, A Military Life of Joan of Arc, with technical precision and rational statement, for he is competent to judge concerning inspiration through the luminous analysis of the theories of Spiritism of Gabriel Delaine, Brière de Boismont, Léon Denis, and some others. That which inspired Joan of Arc also inspired in the Occident one of the greatest poetic, literary, political, aesthetic, and religious movements which we put under the general term Romanticism. In fact, Ossianism, as we know, is one of the roots of European Romanticism. It was engendered by the work of a medium, James Macpherson. It is a case of the so-called Spiritist medium prior to literature. James Macpherson, who produced in English prose the Bardic Messages, originally expressed in the Gaelic language by the poet King Ossian, a bard of the 3rd century. James Macpherson has been accused of literary fraud because, naturally, he had employed the Gaelic poems in every document. These message poems were dictated to him by the spirit of Ossian in the very language of the medium writer, but in the style and rhythm so original that they forced the enthusiastic admiration of most of the great writers of his age and the following Turgot. Diderot contributed to making these poems known to Europe, and Madame de Staël considered a scion as the Homer of the North. Chateaubriand did not withhold his admiration, even after the accusation of literary fraud. We have these messages in a French translation by P. Christian. P. Christian is the author of the famous basic History of Magic. The messages of a scion were dictated, or inspired, as we like to say, to James Macpherson during a period of 3 years, 1760 to 1763. Fingal in 6 songs, Camola, a dramatic poem, The War of Instantama, The Deliverance of Caractera, Cathon, Darthula, War of Timora, etc. On the whole, about a score of poems of various lengths. These poems lost their prestige in the eyes of the public when they were attributed to literary fraud. We have reason to believe that Shakespeare, Walter Scott, and some others were, like James Macpherson and Victor Hugo, the inspired mediums of Romanticism. They transmitted the messages as James Macpherson transmitted from Ossian. It would be interesting to publish some day the spiritual origins of Romanticism, and Gabriel Gobron brings us to this subject an inspiring and documented source of incontestable originality and authenticity. What is curious to us is that it was P. Christian, a man initiated into the occult and a medium himself, who translates into French the works of Ossian, the 3rd century bard, the Gaelic poems received by James Macpherson. P. Christian closes his introduction with these lines, regarding these poems which maintain here and there a comparison with those of Homer, and often lean toward Hebraic poetry, which has been so much praised and perhaps so poorly understood. The proofs of the Spiritist origin of Caodaism will be easier to demonstrate than that of Ossianism, and it is also to render homage to, and by this means to communicate with the hereafter, that the present work was published, recast, clarified, and completed. It is Spiritism that led Gabriel Gobron toward Caodaism, as the latter has been revealed by Spiritism. Caodaism is a true Reformed Buddhism. It is also a particular form of Spiritism, the Vietnamese Spiritism. We add today, in order to make it complete, the synthesis of religions, because what we desire to reveal in the public is revealed in the present edition. Since Caodaism, born of Spiritism, reformed Buddhism, and afterwards expanded into a harmonious synthesis of all religions, it did so without losing the best of its Spiritist origins or of its Buddhist formation. Being true theosophy, the Caodaist doctrine draws to it through perfect selection all that was good, beautiful, and above all essential in other religions, whether in the practical, the moral, the ritual, or in philosophy. Due to the great modesty of Brother Gago, Gabriel Gobron is so called by the Caodaists of Indochina, he willingly limited his role to that of polemicist advocate, propagandist of the new religion. His essays, his meditations, his study of mysticism merited more. We can say today that he is the first philosopher and the first historian of Caodaism. His work seemed to be unfinished when he left the earthly life for the eternal Orient, but with the publication of the present work, his value as historian of Caodaism is confirmed. From the beyond, Brother Gago enlightens and protects us still, for such was the profound will of his faith. Piously, let us listen to him, accepting his mission with a holy Caodaist humility. If we have accepted this ungrateful role of first historian of Caodaism, it is because our brothers and friends of Vietnam have judged in their excessive indulgence that we were one of the best informed Westerners on the progress and tribulations of Reformed Buddhism. Feeble health hardly favors the overwhelming duties of such a charge. We apologize to the attentive reader for all the imperfections of our work. We ask him only, above all, to pardon us when we cannot stay in line, that is to say, fraternally, even toward our adversaries and enemies. It is then that the Caodaist will have proved unworthy. He will not have attained self-mastery. The patient will have torn his cap in a fit of ill humor and stamped the most sublime pages of Christ, Buddha, and Confucius. By compunction, we have transmitted the message. It only remains for us to turn over in silence to the reader, relieved of our comments, this posthumous work of Gabriel Gobron. Delacourt Galois, executor of the will of Gabriel Gobron. The origins of Vietnamese spiritualism. Reverend Stanton Moses undertook a 6-month retreat at Mount Athos, in which he studied theology, confronting various contradictory theses. An excellent exercise which recalls the spirit, always prone to be doctrinaire, dogmatic, intolerant to greater humility, wisdom, and truth. He was then named to a little pastorate on the Isle of Man, where he never lacked for leisure. Nature, reading, prayer, meditation, silence, and mystic contemplation made him a poignant orator. The imperator spirit had already seized him, and intended never to release him, no more than his demon would release Socrates. Imperator led Reverend Stanton Moses to Oxford University, but above all made him one of the most precious instruments of the new revelation, one of the most sublimely inspired mediums of our age. It was in the same solitude, the same calm, meditative retreat, that Cao Đài found his first Caodaist. No temple more beautiful than that nature, no book more divine than the book of life. Jesus retired to the Garden of Gethsemane, even to the desert. St. Francis of Assisi spoke to his little sister, the rain, to his little brother, the wind, to the silent stars, to the talkative swallows, and he stroked the jaws of the wolf of Gubbio and brought it home like a pet dog. The Swedish naturalist Ben Berg nestled in his hand that the wildest bird of Lapland. Where the holy is, the earth is holy. Where the holy is, nature rises above itself. The holy rises in man. It is man above himself. The holy rises within man above the level of mankind in communing with the Spirit. Thus, on the threshold of this book, we must listen to the voice which says, "From the height of the roofless tower where ecstasy had carried me, I regarded the world, sad and cold, black and shaken. From the height of the roofless tower where faith had raised me, I saw afar the sea, guarding its blue quietness like a veiled virgin. From the height of the roofless tower where faith had led me, I saw the dawn of an eveless morning and an infinite day. From the height of the roofless tower where love had placed me, I beheld the sun lighten the earth. The sad, cold world turned red and warm. Black became white, and white was changed into black. Peace and harmony reigned in the world. From the height of the roofless tower, my heart wept for joy. My soul saw ecstasy. My body broke with pain. From the height of the roofless tower, I saw the shadow ship crossing the sea of light, and wondering, I contemplated the mover of stars, the ordainer of worlds. I saw the elements, the seasons, and the months obey the watcher, the great and watching eye. From the height of the roofless tower, I saw in him, by him, for him." The first Caodaist. It was early in the year Bin Dan that Caodaism was founded. But for 6 years one man had been worshipping the great master, Cao Đài. Mr. Ngo Van Chu, who was at that time in the service of the Criminal Investigation Department of the Cochin China government. As an administrative delegate in 1919 at a post called Phu Quoc, an island in the Gulf of Siam, Mr. Ngo Van Chu led a life of great wisdom, conforming to the stern rules of Taoism. From time to time, in this isolated place, so favorable to the religious life, he gave himself, with the help of young mediums from 12 to 15 years of age, to evoking the great spirits from whom he received the necessary instruction for his spiritual growth. Among the communicating spirits, he discovered one named Cao Đài, in whom he became particularly interested. From the first, this name caused general astonishment among those present, for, to their knowledge, no religious work had ever made mention of it. Chu, nevertheless, whose wisdom was admired by all, by means of his revelations and philosophical studies, believed he recognized a surname of God. Having asked Cao Đài for permission to worship him in a tangible form, he was ordered to make representation in the form of a symbolic eye. Prayer to the Eye of God. Eye of God, thou art the gold and the crystal of heaven, ethereal essence of all things. Thou seest in all. Bodiless spirit expressed in a look, the wise never confuse the symbol with that which it represents. Thy vision is infinite, total intelligence, penetrating, enveloping, zodiacal. Life, principle of life, life of all principle, which the sun's regard develops and multiplies in the gold of heaven. Nights repose in the light of the moon, crystal of heaven, sidereal light, solar light, lunar light, unique light in the eye of God, unique light in the eye of God. Thou 3-in-1 of the one look, eye of God, bathe my spirit in the light of crystal and gold. Amen. Such was the conversion of the first Caodaist to the new religion that it was able, 6 years later, to plant itself in Saigon. Soon Mr. Chiu's administrative duties recalled him to the capital, where he made several proselytes to the new faith. But let us leave for the moment these first converts to show the reader the manner in which the great master recruited his mediums. It was the middle of the year at Su, 1925. A little group of Vietnamese secretaries belonging to various branches of the administration at Saigon amused themselves evenings by dabbling in spiritism. They made use of a Ouija board. Their first attempts were mediocre, but through patience and practice they finally obtained results. Their questions put to the spirit, sometimes in verse, sometimes in prose, received surprising answers. Their dead parents and friends showed themselves to talk of family affairs and give counsels. These sensational revelations taught them of the existence of an occult world. One of the communicating spirits became particularly noticeable by his high level of moral and philosophic teachings. This spirit, who signed himself under the pseudonym AAA, did not wish to reveal himself, in spite of the entreaties of his hearers. Soon other secretaries came to swell this little group of amateur spiritists. The meetings became more serious and regular. As the Ouija board was no longer convenient, this spirit replaced it by the corbeille à bec. With this apparatus, which permitted direct writing, the communications became more rapid and less fatiguing for the apprentice mediums. On Christmas Eve, the 24th of December, 1925, the guiding spirit, who until then had obstinately guarded his anonymity, revealed himself at last as the Supreme Being, coming under the name of Cao Đài to teach truth to Vietnam. Speaking in Vietnamese, he said in substance, "Rejoice this day, it is the anniversary of my coming to Europe to teach my doctrine. I am happy to see you, O my disciples full of respect and love to me. This house will have all my blessings. Manifestations of my power will inspire even greater respect and love in my regard." From that day forth, the great master initiated his disciples in the new doctrine. Such was the calling of the first mediums charged with the reception of the divine messages. I asked the great master, who from the nearby beyond made answer. I asked the great master, saying, "Venerated Lord, what is the earth?" The spirit replied, "The earth is a vessel which rocks in an ocean of light. This light is time and space. Time is invisible light. Space is visible light. Thus time envelops space as spirit envelops all. Time hovers above, within and without. Space abides beneath, without and within. Of invisible space is time. Of the passing of time is space. The earth is a vessel that rocks in an ocean of light. The earth is time condensed, the waiting of spirit in matter. Consulting the magazine L'Illustré, which undertook a series of articles on various religious manifestations in British India, Siam, China, Japan, the Philippines, etc., we find in number 2, dated March 1933, a study on Caodaism in Vietnam. We read concerning its origins. Of recent date, 1929, Caodaism has grown rapidly and spread through all Cochin China. Origin. Early in 1926, some young Vietnamese scholars, all Buddhists, gathered in a compartment in the middle of Saigon. They had the habit of table tipping and giving themselves to spiritist experiments. After a period of groping about, they finally obtained some surprising results. They said, by means of some of their number who possessed a powerful fluid. They were at first in spirit communication with one of the Chinese sages of antiquity, LİCH, more commonly known as LİCH, the Chinese Homer, author of a literary revival under the 13th Tang dynasty, a fervent Taoist. Thus, once again, we seem justified in our subtitle, Caodaism, or Vietnamese Spiritism. A French testimony. It is that of Mr. Jean Reup, writing in Le Colon Français of Haiphong on the origin of Caodaism. 1926. The year is just beginning. In a few days comes the Vietnamese Tet. Not far from the central market, in a block of shop houses of modest appearance, occupied for the most part by employees of the administration and large business firms. In one of them, since many long months, young clerks from customs, public works, the railroad, and various business houses find themselves from evening to evening playing with the table, tipping it, making it talk. They are all Buddhists. How did it all begin? One of them had heard of spiritualism, of the most important tables in his office, where one of the bosses, a Cochin Chinese, is a convinced spiritualist, member of one of the most important spiritist societies of France. He, in turn, had spoken of it to friends, and one day they found themselves, 4 of them, seated about a table. "We'll see if this works. We'll see if there's anything to it," they said. The beginnings were not very brilliant, but little by little, eliminating those who did not possess the fluid, replacing them by more gifted friends, they marked up extraordinary results. They never failed to receive answers to their questions put to the table. They asked if they were truly in communication with a spirit. The answer was affirmative. The thing became serious. At each session they asked the name of the spirit who spoke to them. Most frequently, Li Tai Bak, or Quan Tan De Quan, or sometimes a person unknown. Thus, that which at the beginning had only been an amusement with a touch of that mysticism which nearly always flourishes in the Vietnamese soul, became a privileged conversation with the superior spirits of the occult world of whom they asked counsel. No doubts were raised concerning the nature of the conversations. First, because it was equally new to all, it was impossible to suspect one another of connivance, and later because certain communications from the correspondent of the occult world revealed such lofty sentiments, scientific knowledge, and depth of philosophy, that none among them was capable of being the author. But the use of the tipping table to correspond with the occult world was not very practical. So much time was required for receiving the shortest sentence. It was at the time of which I speak, that is, shortly before the Vietnamese Tet of 1926, that they made known their complaint to the spirit. It answered that they should make use of the corbeille, and since they asked what that was, those more or less versed in Spiritism or having attended but one séance will see what novices they still were. The Spirit told them to address their compatriot, the Fu Chu, one very deep in Spiritism, for it would be too difficult for himself to make them understand by means of a table what he was talking about. Thus, Caodaism was about to be born, or rather was about to enter into the stage of its popularity, since, for many years, as we shall see, one man had been worshipping Cao Đài. This man, who followed the holy doctrine of Gautama Buddha, was none other than the Fu Chu. Besides the moral teachings of Buddha and those of Confucius, whom he venerated as emanations of the divine, he believed in the existence of a supreme being, all-powerful sovereign master of the universe, called Cao Đài. He believed also in the spirits with whom he claimed to have been in relation for years. The dignity of life of this first Caodaist, to whom the young men were sent, was exemplary. His compatriots unanimously considered him a holy man. He taught the clerks the use of the corbeille à bec, to which I shall return later, which greatly facilitated their spiritualistic séances. He participated with them, happy to make use of mediums particularly apt, gifted, and possessed of unusually powerful fluid. After having entered into relations with the Fu Chu, it was under the same conditions, at the invitation of the same spirit, that they went to find another of their compatriots, a former Cochin Chinese mandarin, a member of the government council, LệCH, who was given from time to time to spiritualist séances. LệCH, whose name the young clerks didn't know until the Spirit told them, had not always led a life of exemplary wisdom. He had, on the contrary, gotten the most out of life, to the point that, at the moment that the young men were sent to him, he had nearly ruined all his fortune. Having already passed the half-century mark, LệCH, who seemed in everyone's eyes an impenitent materialist in his amateur spiritist hours, considered as a warning from the Supreme Being the fact that he, with the Fu Chu, whom he had long known, had been chosen to show the way to the young spiritists. He resolved from that day to lead an exemplary life and to show himself worthy of the mission to which he had been called by Cao Đài. He immediately ceased smoking opium without the slightest inconvenience, which proves, say the Caodaists, how much he was strengthened by the Supreme Being, for without help he could never have cured himself so easily. He abstained from alcohol, from the eating of meat, became, in a word, a sincere Buddhist priest. This miraculous conversion attracted to him the first group of adherents, in general members of well-to-do families, or well-placed government officials, among which was Fu Tung, in the provincial administration of Cholan, who was, like his colleague Chu, a man of superior morals, practicing on every occasion the humanitarian virtues dear to Confucius. The Dak Fu Lei Bei Trang, the honorary Huyen Nguyen Ngoc Tao, and his wife, the former Mrs. Monnier, a very rich Cochin Chinese, who had long used a part of his income for works of benevolence and charity. The Fu Chu, who had first of all been designated to fulfill the functions of supreme chief of the religion, the Pope of Caodaism, decided to retire and was replaced by LệCH. Upon asking one of the principal dignitaries for the cause of Mr. Chu's attitude, I was told that since he had been the first Caodaist of Cochin China, he would normally have been called to fulfill the functions of supreme leader of that religion, but that he had shown himself incapable of overcoming a temptation which God had assigned him, as he imposes to all superior beings before raising them from low degree to a scale the top of which is perfection, and he was, therefore, obliged to redeem this weakness of which he had given proof before taking back the place to which his past seemed to give right. The Pope of Caodaism. The conversion of Mr. Lê Văn Trung, who was to become Pope of Caodaism, was one of the great events of Indochina's history. It was also in 1925 Mr. Lê Văn Trung was living in the city of Cholan. Given to diverse enterprises, in the tumult of that town devoted to the worship of money, he had a spirit completely averse to religion. One evening, at the invitation of one of his relatives, a convinced spiritualist belonging to a religious sect called Minh Ly at Saigon, he went to a séance that was to take place in the suburb of Cao Gao. At the meeting, it was the spirit Li Tai Bak that was manifested. Taking Mr. Chung aside, he revealed to him his spiritual origin, and at the same time announced to him his future religious mission. He then exhorted him to quickly submit himself to the regime imposed by the new faith. Moved by grace, Mr. Chung, without hesitation, sustained by his faith, had the courage to cease smoking opium and follow a vegetarian diet. He also left his business enterprises in order to consecrate himself entirely to religion. The conversion of that man, the day before still attached to wealth and pleasure, is so striking that we may ask ourselves whether the spiritualistic seances organized at Cao Gao had not been inspired by missionary spirits with the unique aim of bringing back Mr. Lê Văn Trung in the way of the law. In fact, when the latter had made up his mind to live according to the new faith which he had adopted, they ordered the dispersion of the spiritualistic group, to the great astonishment and sorrow of its members. In Saigon, the great master, feeling the time had come, united the mediums of Lê Văn Trung. He then sent two of these, Messieurs Cu et Tac, to the newly converted, with the order to organize there a séance during which he should give them instructions. Mr. Chung, although he did not know these mediums, yet accepted their proposition when he understood their motives. An evocatory séance took place. The great master, besides other teachings, announced to Mr. Chung his great mission in the new religion that he was going to found to save humanity. That revelation confirmed the allusions of various spiritualistic messages that Mr. Chung had received at Cao Gao with other mediums. It fortified his conviction and encouraged him to consecrate himself without reserve to religious exercise. Some time after, the great master sent Messieurs Chung, Cu, and Tac close to the Fu Chu, who had to guide them in the religious way as an elder brother. This man, having been so ordered by the great master, welcomed them most cordially. He immediately put them in contact with his first co-religionists. The Caodaist cell was thus formed, was composed of 12 members, all of French culture, and most employees in various administrative departments in Saigon. The earnestness and disinterestedness of these pioneers soon attracted them an increasing number of adherents. The Caodaist religion then came out of its limited circle to spread among the people at the beginning of the year Bendan, 1926. The Fu Chu, used to his solitude, was annoyed by the influx of adherents who bothered him. As an official conscious of his responsibilities, he decided from then on to keep himself free of this great religious movement. Mr. Lê Văn Trung was then named by the great master to replace him at the end of April. First meeting places. Spiritualistic seances continued more and more numerous at individuals' homes, but mainly in meeting places organized in each of the following centers: the town of Cholan, Can Nhóc, Loc Gang, Tan Din, Tu Duc, and Cao Cu. 2 mediums were appointed to each place to receive the teachings of the great master. The admission of new members was also decided there. Adherents came in mass, amounting to hundreds of new enrollments at each séance. Official declaration of Caodaism. The new religion was very rapidly extended. It was received with much enthusiasm, especially by the masses. Anxious to act openly and keep themselves in the strictest limits of legality, its leaders made an official declaration signed by 28 persons, which they sent in on the 7th of October, 1926, to the governor of Cochin, China. Also enclosed was a list of signatures of 247 members present at the ceremony announcing the official existence of Caodaism. Propaganda. After having made that declaration, which was courteously welcomed by the local government, the leaders of the Great Way organized propaganda missions in the interior. These were 3, one for the provinces of the East, one for those of the center, and one for those of the West. In less than 2 months, over 20,000 persons, among which many native notables, were converted to the new religion. It was on account of Spiritism, and especially to the infinite kindness of God, who was always manifested at each invocatory prayer, and whose messages had a decisive influence over spectators, that Caodaism received those mass conversions. The great success was also due to the form of the new worship, which had nothing contrary to that of the principal religions practiced in the country. Festival of the Advent of Caodaism. Since the 10th day of the 10th month, October 14, 1926, the propaganda tours were interrupted.